What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rocket Live. If this is your first time joining us today, then welcome to our live show. My name is Chris Vaglio, and I am the host of the Rocket Live podcast. And you're in the Rocket Studios right here, right now. And I've got another amazing guest today, all lined up, ready to talk to you all and have a great conversation with. And of course, if you're watching this live, please feel free to drop comments or questions in the chat as we go, and we will do our very best to get to those as the show goes along. Before we get started, just a couple quick housekeeping things. If you'd like to support the show, if you like what I do here, if you've seen the show before, please head over to buymeacoffee.com/cvaglio. And feel free to select a level that you feel most comfortable doing. If you think I deserve it, if you think I've done a great job hosting the show, it'd be very much appreciated. Absolutely. And you could also use the link in the description and the show notes below to access any of the links that we're going to be talking about throughout the entire show. Another way that you can help the show grow and help support the show is to hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're watching this or listening to the audio version of the show when it is released, because that does help the show grow. And also, leaving me a nice little review or rating or something like that also helps the show grow. So I very much appreciate that if you can take the time to quickly do that. And of course, if you're looking to connect with me directly, you can use any of the links below in the show notes or video description, or you can text the words "Let's Rock" to 88500 right now, and you'll get all my contact information, and then we can get connected. So to text the words "Let's Rock," all one word, to 88500. And of course, please support my show sponsor, which is Win Local. So if you are looking to do any kind of networking at all, you absolutely have to have the Win Local Share Card. It is a great way to wirelessly connect, virtually connect with anybody, anytime, give them your information. And all you have to do is head over to winlocal.com, and you can actually use my promo code ROCKET10 at checkout, and you'll get an additional 10% off your purchase. I'm telling you, it's changed the way I network. You absolutely have to do it. I think you've seen me post things on social media, and it's been over a year I've been using this, and it's just fantastic, and it's excellent at trade shows, excellent at a lot of in-person networking events. So if you want more information about the product, or if you're looking to sign up immediately because you heard how well I raved about it, head over to www.winlocal.com. And once again, use my promo code ROCKET10 at checkout. All right, now on to the good stuff. I want to bring my my esteemed guest on. Here he is. There he is, Mr. John Renz. What's up, buddy? How are you?
Good. Esteemed. I don't know. I think we need to. I think we need to work on your word choices there. And I just listen before we even get started. You said, if this is your first time, welcome. I just want to say, if this is your first time, please come back after this, because I guarantee he's got better stuff coming after this interview. I can assure you.
No, you're awesome. I'm so glad to have you on. This is great. So for everybody just tuning in right now, I've got my really good friend, colleague, great creator and creative in the industry, Mr. John Renz, who is the VP and creative director over at Prudential. We actually had your counterpart, your partner in crime, on the show not too long ago, Bridget Esposito, and of course, we can't have one without the other. I mean, we got to have Bridget, we got to have you, or it was you and Bridget. Bridget happened to go first, but now we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. John Renz, on the program today. And yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, though. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, it's typically it's never a good move following Bridget. So let me just say that. But yeah, no, Bridget was great. I'll do my best to one up her. Don't put bets on me because she's a force of nature. But yeah, Bridget is my my other half. It's like Wonder Twins,
right? Or Wonder Twins activate.
Yeah, or like Superman and Clark Kent, right? We're never in the same place at the same time. So we might be one person, maybe not. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's one of those things, but it is great to have that kind of partnership and collaboration, and it's you've had that for years with Bridget. So I definitely urge anybody, if you're listening to this episode first, to go back and watch or listen to the episode I did with Bridget Esposito, also from Prudential, so that way you can get her side of the story. But if you already heard her side of the story and you're here for more, well, guess what? You're in for a treat, because here I am. I have her better half here, in partner in crime, as I said, John Renz here. And so, John, let's dive into it, because there's a lot I want to get to. There's a lot I want to talk about. And I know, for the benefit of the audience, like, listen, I've known John for quite some time. John and I have been colleagues. We've worked together. When I used to be in video production, John and I collaborated a lot on projects. And so I have the fortune of knowing a bit about John, but I realize the audience does not know, or some of you may know, but for those of you new, you don't know much about John. So, John, let's set the stage a little bit. Let's talk about, because I know that you've done a lot, and we'll get into that and how you've landed at Prudential and how that's evolved as well. But let's go back, because I think it's important, and I love doing this. And it's like, not everybody has an origin story, right? Like every superhero has an origin story. You have an origin story, but I always find it great with creatives, because there's always that certain spark, whether you intended it or not, that totally got you down the road of going more into creative. So I'd love to hear that from you. Like, what was that thing that kind of set things in motion for you creatively?
Sure. Well, the secret is I was bitten by a radioactive copywriter when I was a teenager, and it's all been downhill from here. No, so thank you, Priscilla, my good friend over across the pond.
Yes.
So it's funny, when I was growing up, I fell in love with the craft of writing when I was in high school. And I actually, heading into college, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be the next Woodward and Bernstein. I wanted to be an investigative journalist, and I wanted to crack the next big story. And I just thought that was fantastic. And I went off to college. And the way journalism school works is, your first year you're in the classroom,
right?
And then once you start to get into upper level courses, you kind of go out in the field. Your professors are editors and of local papers and things like this. And I started to, part of my coursework was working as a journalist. So I was, covering everything from, parks and recreations and town halls and all kinds of things. You sort of run the gamut. And I quickly realized that journalism just didn't do it for me. I love the craft of writing. It wasn't creative enough really for me. Maybe I should have waited. Now it seems to be nothing but creative. But
I know, right? It's definitely transformed over the years.
That's right. Back then it was, you had to just report the fact.
Yeah.
So I have a cousin, Brian Flood, who is one of the great copywriters in the industry, and he's worked on his own in Boston for years and years. We were having a heart to heart, and he said, "Why don't you give advertising a try?" Right. And I went up and I shadowed him for a week, and I said, "Wow, this is really cool." So I went back to school and I landed myself an internship at an ad agency and PR firm, and man, I was hooked. I was like, "This is how I want to spend my days." I got into it and I said, like, if I can do this for the rest of my life, that's great, right? Like, I like to say, and I've stolen this line from Brian, my cousin, but other people work for a living. I'm in advertising. I get to play in the sandbox of ideas. All along. So I was all in. So that's how I found advertising, and that's how I found the love of copywriting.
Yeah, I love that. And that's so thank you for sharing that, because I do think it's important to set the stage, especially for those people who are watching and listening who, maybe they're still early in their journey and they're still trying to figure out like what they want to do. Or, maybe have been doing something for a while and they're looking to make a change, and they're feeling that calling or that bug or whatever you want to call it, the spark to do something new. And that's why I think it's great sharing your story, because it shows to me that, while you're interested, you went, you did something, experienced it. Hey, I like this, but I don't necessarily want to pursue this like full time. There's got to be more. And it wasn't, fulfilling you in the soul creatively. And so you went and you found something, and then boom. And it's like, it's so funny how that will like click with people. It feels right.
Yeah. People stumble into the advertising industry through all sorts of channels, right?
Right.
They want to be writers and they become copywriters. Some people are history majors and they just love stories, and they love digging, and they love, crafting, and they find their way into this path, right?
Right.
They're visual storytellers, and they find, and it offers up such wonderful ways to solve problems, right?
Right.
And which is different, right? You look at, like, how do you tell a story, right? Which is difficult in of itself. How do you tell a story in a big novel or a huge
Right.
movie, right? Which is hard. Well, do the same thing in 30 seconds or 15 seconds or 6 seconds,
Yeah.
right? Oh, and by the way, make sure they click and buy at the end of it, right? That's a whole other art form.
Yeah.
And these are great creative challenges that I think a lot of people just embrace, and they say, wow, I've got to do that. And it's like the old exercise, tell a story in 6 words or less.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Thing.
Which is, it's still a challenge. It's still really hard to do. And
Sure.
this is why too, like, I love, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but I do find it to be relevant, because I find that what you're saying too is, and this is where, people can, say what you want about social media and things like, but platforms like TikTok and Instagram, like what you just said, that's the enjoyment I get at, is like, what's the challenge? And I love watching what other people do creatively in that, like, 15-second, 10-second. And of course you have longer videos, but really, especially when TikTok even very first came on, and, went from Musical.ly to TikTok, still was like that 15 to 30 seconds. And people really, really got super creative.
Sure.
And I love it. It's like, what a source of inspiration.
I've had because social media is part of my responsibility,
Right.
Prudential, I have to watch everything, right?
Yeah.
And I take a lot of abuse from my kids for this, like, great, dad's on TikTok, right? But I was, when Musical.ly came out, you just have to be aware of it.
Right.
And then, of course, COVID hits, and TikTok was sort of, like Zoom, right? It was like,
Yeah.
The pandemic kind of helped that explode. And but yeah, you're right, because when it first became TikTok, it was essentially just a slightly elevated Musical.ly, which was just dances and things like this.
Yeah.
It really has truly evolved, and people have done remarkable jobs of storytelling and, like, how-to videos, and it's just, it is just fun to watch them push the boundaries and see how far they can go in such a tiny amount of time. And it's great, as you get older, to look back and watch as newer eyes and younger eyes are creating this stuff.
Yeah.
They truly approach the content in a different manner, and it's refreshing, right? And it's like,
it is
one of the things I love about advertising is you shouldn't, I guess you could, but that might be bad. You should never stop learning, right? And that's
right.
And it's just such a great learning exercise to watch some of these platforms develop.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that, because, and I get when people will say, like, oh, I don't know, that's for kids. And it's like, yeah, no, but it's not. And it may have started off but this is it though. I mean, it is something to look at. Like, when a younger culture is into something, it says something that will probably be something that should be watched and looked at, because that's where you're going to start getting some new inspiration. What's going on? Like, what creativity is being pushed in those areas. And so from that standpoint, like, this is where you should open your mind, and especially people in the creative industry, like, to sort of like have blinders is not doing you any favors at all. Like, you really have to, like, whether you like it or not, you should at least take it in, experience it, and see if there's any inspiration to be drawn from that.
Oh God. Yeah. I think to be, first of all, I think to go into advertising, to go into any kind of realm here with creativity, but especially advertising, I think you really have to be a student of the world. You have to just never want to stop learning. I mean, virtually about anything, and again, I catch a lot of ribbing. My kids will catch me on TV. They're like, what are you watching? And I'm like, and it's like, I'll find, I'll be equally as fascinated with, the Theodore Roosevelt documentary, which is currently airing, as I will with, Flea Market Flip, right? Like, it's just different forms of content and different ways of staging. And you got to soak it all in, and it's all sort of grist for the mill, right? How do you then continue to push that out leverage all the best pieces and keep telling better and better stories.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So how long have you been at Prudential now at this point?
So I've been at Prudential longer than I've been at any other company.
Mhm.
And I've been 14 years I've been at Prudential,
That's awesome.
which is, like I said, the longest I ever was any place before was 5 years.
Mhm.
So for me to be at a place for so long, first of all, is shocking to me. I went from being, walking in and sort of laughing at all these people with 20-year
Right.
tenures. Oh my God, look at these lifers. And now I blinked and now I'm a lifer, right?
Goes
But
fast.
well, it does. But what is kind of made it what, I walked into Prudential at an interesting time,
Mhm.
right? So I had been freelancing for several years, and a former boss of mine was at Prudential.
Right.
And she referred me, and they were actually looking for a freelancer. So I interviewed for a freelancer position. After a few weeks, they called me back and they said, no, we want to make it a full-time gig. And I was in a little bit of a lull. So truthfully speaking, I took this gig, didn't think I'd be here any more than 6 months. And I said, listen, I'll take it. I'll take the paycheck and I'm out.
Right.
But I got in, and the work was pretty good and the people were pretty good. And then they brought in sort of a person they brought in a boss, right, to
Right.
run the place. And he and I really had a good sync, right? A fellow named Jim Irvine. He's actually the creative director at Chubb right now.
Mhm.
And so we had a really good sync, and we started to do some really good work, really elevated work, right? Better. And then someone said, hey, they're doing some really interesting things over at our group insurance. I was with our retirement business.
Right.
Take a look over at the GI space. So I move over there, and they were just starting up a group, and they were really looking for some refinement. And that's when I crossed paths with the famous Bridget Esposito, right? So that's
Right.
when Bridget and I were first teamed up. And for some context, I'm a copywriter. So copywriters, editors, proofreaders are under me.
Mhm.
Bridget, art direction, design, and she had video and
Right.
animation was under her. And as you'd mentioned before, it was just from a partnership standpoint.
Mhm.
It was partnership, it was opportunity, and it was great work, right?
Right.
And we did great things at group insurance. And then as Prudential has evolved significantly as a
Yeah.
business over the recent years. So
Right.
when I first walked in, it was very siloed. Every business was kind of like its own world.
Yep.
And then we went through a rapid period of sort of coming together. And then so the first thing they did was they unified the institutional business and the individual businesses, right? And then
Right.
Bridget took that over. Then they unified all the US businesses, and Bridget and I took that over, right? And it's all on our way to world domination, of course. But and as sort of the silos have come down, bigger and bigger opportunities have come across, and it's become more and more interesting. The challenges have become bigger and
Mhm.
juicier, right? So
Yeah.
there was no reason to leave.
Right.
If you were to ask me 14 years ago, do you see yourself still working for an insurance company in 14 years? I'd have said, hell no. But having gone through this path, it's just wonderful challenges after wonderful
Yeah.
challenges. And
Yeah,
that's
and at the end of the day, it's really not just an insurance company. I
no
mean,
gosh, no.
there's so much going on, and like once again, I've had the benefit of working with you and on certain projects, things like that. So I was able to learn a lot, which was eye opening for me
Yeah.
to like learn how much goes on inside and the different things that you're creating at the different levels. And yes, it's a lot. And from one thing that I learned is you guys do a lot of storytelling, like a
Yeah.
lot of storytelling, and I found that to be very, very fascinating, and it makes complete sense,
Yeah.
but just didn't put two and two together till I
Well,
was like seeing how you guys work.
yeah. Well, it's, what helps is that, you've got this great brand, Prudential brand,
Mhm.
and, we do really important work.
You
And,
do, yeah.
there's, it's easy to look at some companies like, Amazon, Google, and Facebook, and all of these companies and say, well, they're the real innovative companies, and they are, right?
Yeah.
But Prudential is an incredible innovator. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when you see some of the things that we have done, I mean, most people don't realize this. Prudential is a company because the founder of it, there was no such thing as affordable life insurance. So John Dryden, who started Prudential, a little history lesson, right,
Yep.
created an affordable life insurance policy for the working man. Because, 100 and nearly 50 years ago, if you died and didn't have anything, you were basically buried in a pauper's grave.
Right.
And so he created something that you could, for a few pennies a week, preserve your dignity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe have something that your family could be okay with for a little while. And
Right.
we've continued sort of innovating in terms of like, securing pension payments, in a world where pensions are collapsing, we help keep them going on. So when you think of like people's livelihoods, people's income, if they
Right.
get hurt or sick, we protect all of that stuff, right? Which is really important. And maybe it doesn't sound as sexy as Tesla or Google, but let me tell you, when the time comes for you to walk out in retirement and you're
Yeah.
going to have a paycheck for life thanks to Prudential, that's pretty sexy. And
Yeah.
right, or when you hurt your back and you can't work for 6 months, but you're still getting a paycheck from Prudential, that's pretty sexy.
Right. No, it 100% is. And that was the thing for me that, once again, when I started working with you and doing some of the projects we worked on together, that was like a big takeaway for me, as to like those bits and yes, and the story. And it just, because you don't think about it till you're like really doing it, and then how much of behind the scenes gets out. Like, this is what goes on behind the scenes to actually create all this. So yeah, that was a great inside look at things, which I think is another good point I want to touch on, because this is another thing that I think a lot of the guests I have on the show, and this was great because Bridget came on and we did talk about this a bit, is that a lot of folks that I have on the show are business owners. They're running their own ships, or they're agency owners, or they're solopreneurs, whatever, creative professionals. But what I think is unique with what you bring and what Bridget was talking about too, which is that you're inside a company, right? So you're doing that inside like marketing. And so from that perspective, I'd love for you to talk about that, because I think it's important for people to understand how that translates, for maybe folks that are like at an agency, or they got their own creative thing going on, to the things that you're talking about, but it's internal. So why don't you talk a little bit about that inside, like the mechanism, how that works, and maybe what the philosophy is around that.
Yeah. So just like Bridget, I began my career at agencies, right?
Yeah.
I didn't work for big mammoth shops. I worked more for boutique firms.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I made the move to in-house. I really enjoy being in-house. I loved agency work. I like being in-house, right? So when you look stereotypically, the agency is, the ad agencies, that's the outside perspective, right?
Right.
They need to be sort of on the bleeding edge, right? And that is very valuable. That's really, really valuable to a brand, to a company, to get that perspective, right? So no disrespect to any of my agency brethren. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now, in-house brings a different kind of value, right? In-house, you really get to know the business. How does the business operate? What's important? How are you measuring? What are your metrics? How do you make money? What's profitable and what's not profitable? And when things are really good, like the way sort of Prudential approaches thing, you get a wonderful blending of the two.
Right.
You do get to do that great creative work. But one of the things that I sort of view as like sort of the superpower of being like an in-house is just the access. I mean, one of the, when you're in an agency, you're really relying on how open and honest is a client going to be with you, right? How good is the brief going to be? How true are they going to be in the brief? Are they really going to be vulnerable and let you know what's what, right? And that's important if you want to do great work, right? You need those clients that are going to want to open up. They're going to let you see the underbelly. They're going to let you see the warts and all.
Yeah.
And let you do what you do do best, right? Which is sell and position and tell their story. When you're inside, you get that firsthand, right? It's very difficult to hide that,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, I just always found that refreshing, right? So if you look at, when you and I first started working together, we were working on our disability lines and life
Yeah.
insurance. And if I'm writing if I'm writing a TV commercial for a disability product, and I've got a question about disability product, I just walk down the hall and talk to the guy who made it, right?
Right.
If I,
Yeah.
if I'm writing about our pension risk transfer solutions, and I've got a question about it, I'll just go to the guy who made it, and
Yeah.
I'll ask them, and it's you get it right from the horse's mouth, and there's a real power there, right?
I
And
agree. I do. I think there is a real power there.
yeah, it's tricky, right? It's and this is why it helps to have been at an agency, right? It's when you're in an agency, you have a real formal structure, right? You usually have
Mhm.
strategists and account managers, and they
Right.
vet all of this information, right? And they do all of the hard work vetting things out so that the creatives can just go and be wildly creative.
Right.
Um, at a company, now we'll have those disciplines too, right? But it's at times not as structured as an agency might be, which again provides you with unfettered access. Now I
Right.
think that's great because not only are you hearing the work directly from the horse's mouth, you're pitching it, right? You're pitching it and you're defending the work and you're championing that work all the way down the line.
Mhm.
puts that puts, in my opinion, as a creative, that puts you in a really great and enviable situation
Yeah.
if you've got a good relationship with your internal partners or slash clients, right?
Right.
Because you now have a dialogue. You're at the table and you're saying, you don't like the work. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the strategy. Let's talk about the
Mhm.
approach. Let's talk about the creative decisions that we've made,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, and I think that's great, and I think that is a great difference in, agency versus in-house. I think that's a really good distinction to bring up for sure. But so I'd love to hear a little bit more because I thought that was really great because I think navigating like how in-house works. But um, how is it when you're like internally? Like, is Prudential looked at as the client? Like, how does that sort of work? How does that I guess the level of service? It's like, yes, you're an employee, but like there's little differences in there. And I love for you to talk about how you guys navigate that, like being, you know, in creative and marketing and all that inside of Prudential.
Sure.
Like it's big, it's huge. So it's like
It really is, and I'll be honest with you. Depending on who you sort of work with, as I said, I began at an ad agency, right? So I
right.
refer to
Yeah.
my partners as clients, and I really shouldn't. They're partners,
Right.
right? And I often say that to my team when they refer to client, and I have to keep sort of anchoring back. Hey, we're all on the same team, right?
Right.
Which is a different dynamic, right?
Right.
They are, our partners in that we're helping make, just in an agency world, right? We're
Hmm.
helping their strategies come alive, right?
Right.
We're helping them deliver on their P&L goals. We're helping them deliver on whatever their business objectives are, right? But we're all in it together. That's the thing that's really compelling from my standpoint, right?
Hmm.
So we're all at a table together. And while the creative team has to fight for creative integrity, if we want to say it,
Right.
and present, right? And the business strategy team may not care as much about that because they got to focus on sell.
Right. Right.
It creates an interesting opportunity to have a compelling dialogue, right? Where you can state your case and say,
Hmm.
this is why saying it this way is better. This is why saying, opening up your, when you open up this digital experience with this
Right.
sentiment, this is how we suck the reader in, right? This
Hmm.
is how we, when we create our subheads this way, it helps the reader through the story. So they
Right.
don't like read your headline and die, right? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
all the way through, right? And there's a real art and craft to that. So what I've always embraced is having the active dialogue. We're all at the same table. We're all at the same team, all on the same team. We perform different functions. At the end of the day, we're all Prudential, right?
Hmm.
We're all part of the same organization and we're all focused on the same thing, right? So how do we get there together? And in my opinion, the way you get there is by having relationships with your partners. And it's the same thing if you're in an agency.
I was gonna
Having a
say it's the same
relationship
exact thing. Yeah.
with a client. What's important to you? What are you trying to achieve? And how are we going to help you get there? The moment you look at it as is it us versus them,
Hmm.
right? We're the agency, they're the client. We're the creatives, they're the strategists. Boo, hiss. No, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to achieve the same goals, right? In the strategy standpoint, they just may not care as much about how it looks and feels versus the creative team, right? But when you have that open dialogue, when you have that demonstrated understanding with the clients and the partners, right? When they understand that you've heard them, right?
Right.
That's a world of difference. We have a, we, like most companies and agencies, we have a workflow system that we
of course,
work into and things like this, right? And one of the things that drives me mad is when folks will do some work, they'll craft some copy, they'll create a design, and then they just upload it, and they go upload it for review, and I'm like, oh my God, please don't do that. I call that the cold handoff, right?
Yeah.
Because we've all been there. A customer will come to you and they'll say, I need you to write an email that does A, B, and C. Great. Well, we all have been there, and you start doing it, and A, B, and C doesn't work. So you have to go A, B, and D, right?
Right.
Well, when you do just give that back to them in no context, they go, well, this guy didn't even listen to me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When you go back and you say, I heard you, and I know you wanted this, but here's why this didn't work. And I worked on it, and we figured out this solution that we think it really gets to the heart of what you're doing. And you're demonstrating to them that you care, right?
Right.
It's important to you because it's important to them. And that builds a bridge and a bond that is just so important. And I don't care if you're in-house or you're at an agency. If the clients don't know you care about them,
right,
you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems.
Well said. I think that pretty much goes across every business, every industry, no matter what you're doing. So I think that's really, really well said. So this is a great conversation. I could keep going forever. But I do want to make sure I get to some other important topics, though.
Sure.
Before we wrap it up.
Yep.
One of them being is that, which I didn't know about this. I didn't know this about you, Mr. John Renz, but apparently you are the keeper of useless trivia.
Yeah.
And what category of useless trivia are we talking about? Are we talking about films, movies, music, or is it just like rando facts type of thing?
It's really just a lot of nonsense. Movie quotes. It's my mind. Maybe that's what got me to advertising.
I was going to say, I'm starting to see a straight line.
Oh my God! It's just my mind soaks up these things. And what the unfortunate thing is I've really passed this. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse.
Right.
Passed it on to my sons. Right. and it's pretty sort of awful and remarkable, but we just what's really funny is if you watch our threads, our text, it's the most insane trading of information. And like, oh my gosh, look, did you realize that, and now of course you're questioning me, and I'm drawing a blank on some.
That's okay.
Like,
it'll come to you afterwards. You're gonna text me like
a fourth person on the moon, tripped and fell, and it's like, okay, why does this stuff stick with me? I don't know. I think it's maybe
good though.
I think it's maybe because I get afraid if I'm at a cocktail reception and I don't, I absolutely have to know the origin of why a sandwich is called a sandwich, right? Yeah. And if no one knows, it's because of the Earl of Sandwich, was playing a game. I think it was cards or something. And he was so engaged, he didn't want to leave to eat. And then he ordered one of his helpers to just take some meat and put it between two slices of bread, and voila, the sandwich. So there you go. Welcome to my world. Awful trivia. Stuff you will never, ever use.
But the thing is but you'll use it. And I think this is good because I think it's the same thing that goes in with like when you tell people a lot. And I talk to people a lot when I'm working with them, coaching them and stuff, is like always have like some stories like locked and loaded and ready to go. Like have stories that you're really good at telling. You've told them before, and sort of like which stories to tell at right times are going to resonate. I think that for you, like this is like, and I'm sure you have your stories, but I think this is a good added benefit because it's a great way to break the ice in a situation. It is a good, and it's a great conversation starter. Like you telling me that now, it's like, now that would lead into like talking about sandwiches and favorite kind of sandwiches and what kind of bread you like. Like it opens up a door
Right.
a gateway into
And let me,
like
and let me, and
lots of stuff.
let me tell you, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Coachability things, right? I'll get another uses. I'm also a trivia history buff, right? So I got two great pieces of it. I took my sons to one of the first trips to Washington, D.C. when they were young. And there was a World War II exhibit that was going on in the National Archives. And there was the original text of Roosevelt's speech, right,
Okay.
for Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And I forget how it was written, but it said something along the effect was today, December 7th, 1941. And it was something like a day that will go down in history as terrible or something, right?
Right.
He crossed it off and he wrote a date that will live in infamy. That was his only change to the entirety of the speech. And that's what you remember, right?
Right.
So sometimes when my team kind of leans, what are you editing? It's really good. Yeah, but that one thing may be good. That one thing.
I mean, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's always that one little thing that just then makes it, memorable, puts it over the edge, whatever you want to call it.
And then in the same trip, we went to the Aerospace Museum and we watched this documentary on JFK making the prediction about going to space, which I'd all forgotten about, right? And he had said in the early 60s, we will put a man on the moon before the end of the decade. He was out of his mind. We weren't even close to doing that, right? But he did it, son of a gun. I turned that into a direct mail piece after 2008 and the whole market collapsed. People didn't want to invest for retirement anymore because they were like, well, why bother? I can't get ahead. So we had this whole concept wrapped around that idea, right? It was sort of the man on the moon, and it opened up and it gave a very brief history lesson about JFK said we were going to do that. Everybody laughed at us. You can't do that. That's insane. You can't overcome. But he put a plan in place and he stuck to it and he did it. So the crux was saving for retirement may seem impossible. You can do it. You just get a plan in place and you stick to it. And it was a huge success, right? It's relatable stories and bizarre history that some people would take in and go, okay, I've forgotten it,
Right.
And but for me, it kind of, these things kind of come in my head and dance around and find their way into copy. So
Well, I love it. I think it's great. I mean, I very much, I'm very similar in a way of I try to find inspiration in everything, and I try to remember things like that too. And I use that, and I have throughout my whole career, and I still to this day do that, and I think it's wonderful, and it's something that you should never stop doing. So I hope everybody who's been listening or watching this has really learned a lot from John's story and his inspiration and how he has channeled that into his career. And I think it's great. So, never stop being inspired, never stop learning, which is something you said right up front. And it's so true, because listen, we're still alive, we're still doing it. So, if you're not learning, you're not living. That's how I see it.
No. If you're not going to keep getting better if you're not going to keep pushing the envelope and trying to get better, I'm not so sure advertising or any creative field is the right place for you.
No, I 100%. Well, and I also too just think general in life too. I mean, if you're not moving forward somehow, some way, you're just kind of standing still, and that's not a lot of fun.
Keeps you young and fresh, right? What's the old saying?
Sure does.
Right? You have to grow up. You don't have to grow old, right?
100%. I love that. I love it. Well, John, this was great. I think I said the same thing. I'm like, geez, we talk forever. I think at some point we'll have to do a part 2 and just get all three of us on and just go nuts.
Oh, then you'll really see the banter. You'll really see the back and forth between Bridget and I.
That would be fun to do. That would be great. Yeah. But John, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time. And so if people are looking to connect with you, what's the best way that they should reach out to John Renz?
So I'm in LinkedIn. They can find me on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter handle at @jrenz. I'm not a super active Twitter person. I'm usually the person behind Twitter handles for
writing the tweets,
influencers than I am sort of in front of things. But you can certainly DM me through Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'd love to continue the conversation. This has been a great conversation, Chris. It's always a fun time to connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. And this was a really fun conversation. And I hope everybody out there had a great time listening to, whether you're joining us live or you're catching a replay of this on YouTube, or, listening to the audio version of this show. I really appreciate you spending some of your time with us and listening to the stories, listening to John and any of the other episodes that you may have stumbled across that I've done in the past. So feel free to hit that follow, subscribe button, wherever the button is. Hit that button, because what happens when you do that, you actually get notified every single time I drop a new episode, whether it's on YouTube or it's the audio version, wherever you get podcasts, because that does help the show grow the more you do that. And if you'd also be so kind as to take an additional few seconds to just rate an episode or leave me a little review, that does help the show grow as well and would be very, very appreciated. And if you want to go a little bit further, you can always hit up my Buy Me a Coffee /CVaglio. Those links are in the show notes and the video description below. And feel free to select the level that you are comfortable giving if you feel like I've done a great job being a host of this show and bringing on great guests like John. And if you want to connect with John, his links are in the notes as well, the show notes and the video description. So please make sure you connect with him as well. So, John, any final words, my friend, before we sign off?
No, this has been a lot of fun. And I guess the one thing I'll leave is, if people do want to leave comments and rate, my last push is please rate me higher than Bridget, because I won't be able to live with her if not. And I'll definitely get an okay, because what I realized, and I didn't do this intentionally, I swear to God, I have a prop here. And I was half. My son plays guitar, and I said maybe I should grab my son's guitar and fake. But I have something better. Look.
Oh, look at that! That's it.
How about my notepad? Not
you
bad.
Got a Rocket Growth Agency notepad.
That's
a
right.
Coveted Rocket Growth Agency notepad.
That's right.
If you want your own notepad, you can get it. Just DM me. I'll send you one. But yes, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Terrific.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody once again for watching and listening to the show. I appreciate each and every one of you. And we look forward to seeing you next time right here on the Rocket Live podcast. And always remember, be yourself, be authentic, and always remember to rock it right on.